The journey begins. As Siddhartha stood alone in the forest, ready to begin his great adventure, he thought, "From today onwards I am no longer a prince. Therefore it is not right that I continue to look and dress like one." He took his knife and cut off his long flowing hair, a sign of royalty. Then he met a poor hunter and said to him, "Sir, I have no more need of these silk clothes. If I am to live in the forest, I should wear something rough like yours. Let us exchange clothing." The hunter was surprised and delighted to receive such expensive garments in exchange for his own, and quickly agreed to Siddhartha's suggestion. Now that he was properly dressed as a poor seeker of the truth, Siddhartha began to look for a teacher who could show him the way to end all suffering. He wandered through the forest and spoke to all of the many holy men he found there. Everywhere he went he was welcomed with respect. Even though he now wore the ragged clothes and ate only the poor food he could beg, he was still a very handsome and striking-looking man. When the people in the forest saw him coming, they said to each other, "Here comes a very special person. His face is so strong and determined. If such a man is looking for the truth, he is surely to find it." Siddhartha studied with several teachers, but was not satisfied with what he learned from them. What they teach is helpful, he thought, but it does not lead to perfect happiness. Finally he heard that some very wise men lived in the kingdom of Magadha, where King Bimbisara ruled. He decided to travel far to the south and east to find them. One day, as he was walking through Rajagriha, the capital city of Magadha, he passed near the palace gates. One of King Bimbisara's ministers saw him and immediately ran to the king. "Sire," he said excitedly, "I have just seen a most unusual man in the city. He is dressed in rags and begs his food door to door, but I am sure he must be a great person. His face is so strong, and he walks with such dignity. It almost seems that a special light shines from him." The king was very interested and asked that Siddhartha be brought before him. They talked together for a while, and the king was very impressed by his intelligence, modesty, and kind manner. Then the king said, "I have never met a man I felt I could trust more than you. Please settle here in Rajagriha and help me rule my kingdom." But Siddhartha replied politely, "O king, I have already had the chance to rule a kingdom, but I had to refuse. I am not interested in wealth or power, only in the path of truth. I thank you for your offer, but I have come to your kingdom only to find teachers who can help me with my search." 6 years of struggle. Eventually Siddhartha came to the forest where the wise men lived. He studied first with Arada and then with Udraka. In a short time he mastered everything they had to teach. But still he was not satisfied. "My teachers are holy people, but what they have taught me does not bring an end to all suffering. I must continue to search on my own." He continued his travels until he came to the Niranganga River near the holy town of Gaya. He crossed the river and entered the forest on the other side. There he found a group of 5 men. Their life was extremely simple. They ate little food, lived out in the open, and sat perfectly still for many hours each day. "Why are you doing such painful things to your body?" the prince asked these men. "Most of the people in the world treat their bodies very gently," they answered, "yet still experience much suffering. We feel that if we can learn to master pain, we shall have found the way to control all suffering." Siddhartha thought to himself, "For many years I have lived in those luxurious pleasure palaces. I was treated very gently, yet still my mind did not find peace. Perhaps these men are right. I shall join them in their practices and see if this leads to the end of suffering." And so he began these difficult and painful practices. He sat for hours and hours in the same spot. Even though his legs and back hurt very much, he would not move a muscle. He let himself be burned by the blazing sun and chilled by the winter winds. He ate barely enough food to remain alive. But no matter how difficult it was, he thought, "I must continue and discover the way out of all this misery." The 5 men were amazed at Siddhartha. They said to themselves, "Never have we seen anyone with as much determination as this man. He drives himself on and never quits. If anyone is ever going to succeed in these practices, it will be Siddhartha. Let us stay near him so that when he discovers the true path we shall be able to learn it from him." Siddhartha treated his body more and more harshly. In the beginning he slept only a few hours each night, but eventually he stopped going to sleep altogether. He stopped taking even the one poor meal a day that he used to allow himself, and would only eat a few seeds or berries that the wind blew into his lap. He grew thinner and thinner. His body lost its radiance and became covered with dust and dirt. He became little more than a living skeleton. But still he did not give up his practices. 6 long years passed. Siddhartha was 29 years old when he left the palace and all their pleasures behind. Now he was 35, having spent 6 years with hardly any food, sleep, shelter, or decent clothing. One day he thought to himself, am I closer to my goal now than I was 6 years ago, or am I still as ignorant as before? When I was a prince and lived in luxury, I had everything a person could desire. I wasted many years in those prisons of pleasure. Then I left and began my search. I have lived in these forests and caves and had nothing but poor food and much pain, but I still have not learned how to put an end to suffering. I can see now that it was a mistake to punish my body like this, just as it was a mistake to have wasted so much time in those palaces. To find the truth, I must follow a middle path between too much pleasure and too much pain. He remembered that many years ago, after he had seen the dead man, that he had meditated under a rose-apple tree. After that meditation, he thought, my mind was very calm and still. I was able to see things clearly for the first time. I shall try to meditate like that again now. But when he looked at himself, he realized, I have been sitting here for such a long time with no food that I am tired, dirty, and weak. I am so thin that I can see my bones through my skin. How can I meditate when I am too hungry and dirty even to think clearly? And so he slowly pushed himself up and went to bathe himself in the river. He was so weak, however, that he fell and almost drowned. With great effort, he managed to pull himself to the shore. Then he sat for a while, resting. In a small village at the edge of the forest lived a herdsman and his wife, Sujata. She had just given birth to her first child and was very happy. She took the finest milk from her husband's cows and prepared a delicious meal from it. Now she was taking this food into the forest as an offering to spirits she thought lived there. She had often prayed to these spirits and wanted to thank them for helping her have such a healthy baby. As she entered the forest, she saw Siddhartha sitting there. His body was thin and weak, but his face was radiant and handsome. Sujata gazed at him in surprise. I have never seen anyone like that before, she thought to herself. Perhaps it is the king of the tree spirits himself. And so she took the specially prepared food and placed it before him. Siddhartha slowly opened his eyes and saw the bowl in front of him. Smiling silently to Sujata, he lifted it to his lips and began to drink. To her amazement, his body grew more and more radiant as he drank. When he was finished, he placed the bowl down and thanked her, saying, You thought I was a spirit, but I am only a man in search of the truth. Your offering has made me strong again. Now I am sure that I will find the truth. Much good will come from what you have done today. Thank you. He crossed his legs in a firm meditation posture and rested his hands in his lap. Then he made a bold and determined vow. I shall not arise from this position until I have reached my goal, even if I die sitting here. And all the spirits of the air looking on rejoiced, hearing Siddhartha's great pledge. It was the full moon day of the 4th month, and the sun was about to set. But the ancient stories tell us that not everyone rejoiced at this moment. There was one force, called Mara, who was terrified and angry, for Mara is the name the Indian people gave to the evil forces that disturb our minds. Mara is our greed, hatred, ignorance, jealousy, doubt, and all the other poisons bringing people unhappiness and grief. Thus, when Mara saw Siddhartha seated under the tree of enlightenment, he was enraged. Calling his sons and daughters around him, he shouted, Look, all of you, Prince Siddhartha is seated in meditation. If he is successful and discovers the way to end all suffering, what will happen to us? Don't you understand that we shall lose all our power? We cannot harm people if he teaches them the truth. We must disturb his meditation, or else we are doomed. So Mara and his evil forces tried everything to disturb Siddhartha. They produced a fearful storm and hurled lightning bolts down around him. They churned up a great wind until everything around seemed ready to crash down. But beneath the branches of the tree everything remained calm, protected by the force of Siddhartha's meditation. Siddhartha's mind was calm and relaxed. As he sat under the tree, his concentration deepened and his wisdom grew brighter. In this clear and peaceful state of mind, he began to examine the nature of life. What is the cause of suffering, he asked himself, and what is the path to everlasting joy? In his mind's eye, he looked far beyond his own country, far beyond his own world. Soon the sun, planets, the stars out in space, and distant galaxies of the universe all appeared in his meditation. He saw how everything, from the smallest speck of dust to the largest star, was linked together in a constantly changing pattern, growing, decaying, and growing again. Everything related. Nothing happened without a cause, and every cause had an effect on everything else. As he saw how everything was connected in this way, deeper truths appeared in his mind. He looked deeply into himself and discovered that his life as Siddhartha the Prince was but the latest in a series of lifetimes that had no beginning, and he saw that the same was true for everyone. We are born, live and die, not one time, but again and again. All of nature rejoiced that glorious morning. Fresh flowers blossomed everywhere and sent their sweet perfume into the air. Birds sang joyfully, and creatures everywhere forgot their fear. Rainbows and beautiful colored clouds appeared in the sky, and people marveled to see such wondrous sights. Buddha himself was filled with the highest happiness. His mind, free from all darkness and pain, felt a boundless joy. For days and weeks he had stayed near the tree of enlightenment, enjoying the bliss and happiness only a Buddha knows. Then he thought, "It was so difficult for me to reach the end of suffering and become a Buddha. I had to work so hard for so long. When I see how blind and ignorant most people are, I wonder if there is anyone who can understand the truths I have discovered. How could I possibly teach them? Perhaps it is better for me to live the rest of my life in the forests alone and enjoy the happiness of being a Buddha myself." Then he heard an inner voice which said, "Please do not forget us. We are the suffering beings of the world. We have been waiting for this moment ever since your birth, and even before that. We have hoped and prayed these many years that you would leave the princely life and discover the way to end all suffering. Now that you have found this path, please teach it to us. Unlike you, we are still suffering." But another thought arose in Buddha's mind. Who will be able to follow the teachings I have to give? Who is strong and brave enough? Who will try hard and long enough? And the inner voice came again. "It is true that our minds are clouded in ignorance, O Buddha, but for some people this ignorance is not so thick. They will be able to understand you. For their sake, please teach us all the true path." Then the Buddha smiled and said, of course, I shall teach. The only reason I left the princely life was to find a way to help others. Now that I have become a Buddha, I shall do everything I can. But even a Buddha cannot remove the sufferings of others if they do. Not try to help themselves. People must want to get better before a doctor can cure them. In the same way, they must want to hear the teachings of the truth before anyone can help them. But whoever comes to me with an open mind will find that I am ready to teach them in every way I can. Then he thought, who, among all the people in this world, should be the first I teach? Who is the most ready? He remembered Arada and Udraka, the two teachers he had met 6 years before. They would be the best to teach, but I can see that they have already died and left this world. Then he thought of the 5 men who lived with him for so long in the forest. They are ready to understand the truth, he thought. I shall teach them first. He knew that he would find those men in the Deer Park, near Varanasi, the holiest city of ancient India. I shall go there, Buddha proclaimed, and begin the work I came to do.